speaking will be Miss Fugedi.
So I have something to tell you guys. And it's going to change the way that you do life. I'm perfect. I do everything right. Everything that you see here, this is what you aspire to be. I four-pointed my way through both high school and college. I've won every contest that I ever entered. You guys are lucky because you have me at your disposal. All you gotta do is follow me around, mimic what I do. Maybe you can be perfect too. Anyone buying that? Doesn't really pass the out loud test, does it? What if I were to tell you that I graduated from high school with a 2.6 GPA? I never even took Algebra 2 because I was so bad at math I barely made it through pre-algebra. I never took one honors or AP class, not because I didn't want to, but because I didn't even know that they existed. My high school counselor told me that I couldn't aspire to what I wanted to be because I just didn't have the aptitude. And here's the clincher. Hold on to your seat, folks. I got an 18 on my ACT, and I didn't even consider taking it again. What? That's crazy. Unheard of, right? The reason that I'm telling you all about this is not to make you jealous of my stellar high school academic performance, but it's to let you see that success is not determined by the college that you go to. Intelligence is not determined by your high school GPA. I wonder why people are so adamant about being perfect all the time. I've been doing this counseling thing for a while, and I have a theory. I think that perfectionism is the socially acceptable way to wear our anxiety. Society honors perfectionism. We celebrate it. Oh, look at her. She just wants to study all the time. She has to get an A on everything. She's just such a perfectionist. So much easier to say, I'm a perfectionist, than it is to say, I am so afraid that if I stumble a little bit, then you are going to know that I'm as much of a failure as I think that I am. If we took off our masks of perfectionism, we might look like this. This is not so pretty to look at. This is flawless. But it's not reality and it's not sustainable. This is authentic. So here's the thing, and this is where I really do have life-changing news to tell you. Perfectionism actually breeds anxiety. It tells us the story that if we don't live up to some unattainable standards, then we are not worth it. Whatever happened to mediocre? By definition, most people and things should fall into the average category, but somewhere along the line, the gap between failure and perfection narrows so much that we have weeded out the average, to the point that if we do something a little bit less than perfect, then we think that we are an utter and complete failure. Perfectionism makes us feel like we are not good enough. It stunts our growth. We can't possibly be self-aware if we're perfectionists all the time, because we can't look inside of ourselves and think that there might be something changing that we need to change, because that would mean that we're not perfect. Fear is the mother of perfectionism. We are so afraid to take risks for fear that we might be, wait for it, average. So this slide is supposed to go doo doo doo, and it would have been really funny. And I think it's also very funny that my presentation is about perfectionism and the slide's not working. But that's all right. You get the gist of it. The thing about perfectionism is is that it's not a one-size-fits-all. Sometimes it actually looks like laziness. Think about it. Sometimes people are so afraid to start things that they think are not going to be perfect, that they don't turn in the work. If you're a teacher in the room, have you ever had those students that they don't do the work? If you're a student, have you ever done the homework but never turned it in? Sometimes it's easier to get the E on that assignment than it is to get the assignment back and get a B or a C, God forbid. Because then you can say, well, I just didn't turn it in. I was just being lazy. If I would have done it, if I would have turned it in, I would have gotten an A for sure. So sometimes it masks itself as laziness. I've dealt with anxiety all of my life. It started to look like perfectionism when my life started to look like this. I grew up in a dysfunctional home. I was the youngest of 3. I grew up in really rocky waters, and everything was very unpredictable. So I wanted to see what I could control in my life. And in my world, perfectionism wasn't about grades. Perfectionism meant that you were goal-driven and you were independent and you didn't have to look to anybody for any support at all. So I tried to play that part. And I did it okay. My best friend, she was squeaky clean. I never made any bad choices. Never partied, never smoked, drank, did drugs. I didn't do any of those things. But as perfectionism will do, it tells us a story that if we mess up just a little bit, that our whole world will come crashing down around us. Statistically, people who suffer with perfectionistic tendencies are more likely to end up with depression and eating disorders. So because I didn't think that I was being authentic in who I was portraying to other people, I looked for things that I could control, and that for me was the food that I consumed and the calories that I expended. And I became anorexic in my junior year of high school. It was fine for a while. I was thin, I was a star tennis player, no one had to worry about me, everyone thought that I had it all together. Hashtag winning. Until I was losing. Because what happens is that we think that in this society, everybody's need, our biggest need is to be seen. I don't think that's right. I think that our biggest need is to feel valid. I spent so much time trying to figure out how I could portray an image so people would see me as somebody who has it all together that I never took the time to figure out why I don't. And I didn't feel valid because validity, that comes from within. And I never felt worthwhile. So all of the accolades that I could get from the outside didn't help me on the inside at all. Cue anxiety. Anxiety tells us the story that we can't. It tells us to run away from anything that we fear. And anxiety actually serves a purpose because it tells us that we are in danger, and it tells us to get away from that danger. But if you suffer with anxiety, or if you have an anxiety disorder, being able to know what's real danger and being able to know what's a danger you made up in your head, it's sometimes hard to tell. I was diagnosed with a generalized anxiety disorder when I was in my early 30s. It's super fun. When you guys see this, I see this. Everything is 10 times bigger than it actually is. And my reaction, 10 times bigger than what it actually should be. And sometimes I come across as defensive, I come across as aloof, I come across as impatient. And it's not because I want to be any of those things. It's because in my head, I'm trying to check my emotions. And I'm trying not to scream and yell at you because I'm saying to myself, I can't do this, get me out of this situation. I can't handle it. Anxiety breeds fear, and it runs on fear. The fear that we cannot do it. Everything that we see is 10 times bigger. If every time we walk into a room, we see a lion ready to bite our head off, the chances of us ever walking into that room are pretty slim. But what if on the other side of that lion is $1 million? And what if that lion is just a cute little kitten? I wouldn't know, because I never took the time to face the lion. And that's what anxiety does. It prevents us from reaching our potential because we live in the bubble of can't. We need to find safety all the time. And we're constantly running from fear that we're never running towards success. And so we don't ever reach our potential. It's funny in life, as if you have a physical impairment, people will give you a little bit of leeway. If you can see it, if you can touch it, then it's real. But if you can't, somehow it's not. If you have a broken leg, people will let you walk a little slower. If you're blind, people will be a little bit more patient with you. If you lost your hair because of a medical condition, people will be a little bit more sympathetic. When I had cancer and lost my hair last year, I thought that losing my hair was the worst thing that could have ever happened to me. And it wasn't good, but it actually ended up being a blessing. Because what happened is that cancer became that socially acceptable excuse for me to lean into my anxiety. Suddenly, I could be defensive, I could be withdrawn, I could be tired, I could be angry, I could be all of those things. And people would say, but she's got cancer, so okay. But I don't think that's what it was. I think that I finally had a reason to figure out what was up with me and why I was letting anxiety control me. And what I did was I started to really look at it more deeply, because this was my opportunity to talk about it with a built-in excuse. I could say I was anxious because of cancer, but that's not true. I've been anxious all of my life. And so what I did was I started to lean into that feeling. You know, you can't kill something unless it's alive. So we need to bring anxiety to life. For those of you who might struggle with anxiety, even the thought of bringing it to life is causing anxious thoughts right now. But if we keep running from it, it only gets bigger. So what we have to do is we have to own it. We have to embrace it. We have to feel it. And so what I started doing is I named my anxiety. Her name is Amber. I apologize if there's any Ambers in the room. It's a lovely name, and I'm sure you're a lovely person. But Amber was a nasty person. She came around when I was the most defenseless. She told me that I needed to get out of the situation and I need to find safety because I'm not capable of doing anything. And the one thing that I know about anxiety, because I've had anxiety and panic attacks, is that I know that they pass. They don't feel like it in the time, but they do. They go away. So knowing that, I say, all right, Amber, you bring it on. Bring on everything that you got. I'm going to feel it. And I allow myself now to feel the tension in my muscles. I recognize what's happening in my shoulders, in my head, in my jaw. And I allow myself to think about the thoughts that I'm having, and I write them down. So I know what I'm thinking, and I know what's triggering those feelings. So now what is happening is that I have a written documentation of a pattern so that I know situations that make me anxious. And now I know before I enter those situations, I have coping mechanisms and tools. Because before, everything made me anxious because I didn't know how to pinpoint what it was. We have got to start leaning in to that anxiety because it's hard for those of you who deal with it, having to walk around telling everybody that you're stronger than you feel, and you feel weak. And that's okay to feel weak. And the problem with anxiety, when it turns into perfectionism, we don't think it's okay to talk about any of our faults, and that is not okay. I have had students who are afraid to take a class that they want to take for fear that they might not get an A. I've had students want to drop an honors and AP class because it might ruin their GPA with a B. I've had students cry in my office because they didn't get into a college that they thought that they should have gotten into, but when I asked them why they wanted to go to that college in the first place, they have no idea. These unrealistic standards that we're putting on ourselves are breeding anxiety, and we have to stop striving for perfection. Do not make perfection the enemy of progress. Strive for excellence, because excellence is individual. Excellence is something that you can attain individually. Perfection, that's a one-size-fits-all type of approach. And nobody can be perfect, right? So that's kind of the irony of trying to get to the place of perfection. You're never going to get there. But if you strive for excellence, you can get there. The only class that I ever did well in high school was English. My English teacher used my thesis paper as an example of what good writing looks like. I got a B in English because I never could figure out how not to write a run-on sentence. And he pulled me aside and he said, I have to give you a B because that's the rubric and you just can't figure out where to put a comma, and I still can't figure out where to put a comma or a period. Everything just runs together. But he said, your content is good, and your content, that cannot be taught. Those words that you put on paper, that's awesome because you can hire somebody to do all of the editing. You can hire somebody to know where to put a comma and know where to put a period, but you can't hire somebody to get writing like this. And it gets me thinking, we need to talk about our content. We need to stop judging ourselves by arbitrary outcomes. And I know that especially for students these days, that need to get that 4.5 GPA is so important because if I don't get a really good GPA, that must mean I'm stupid. Doesn't mean you're stupid. You might be really smart if you get a 1.5 GPA. It doesn't mean anything. I'm not trying to detract from where it gets you to the next step, but we've got to stop putting intelligence in the bubble of what a GPA is. It's ridiculous. And it's damaging. And it's causing anxiety because we're not teaching you how to handle it when you don't get what you want. And you are going to fail. And failure is good, and we need to stop talking about perfection. We need to stop talking about all of our highlights. We need to instead talk about all of the things that we failed. A couple of days ago when I was talking about my speech with my friend Sarah, I said, gosh, I'm really afraid I'm going to mess up. She said, oh, that's funny. You're afraid you're going to mess up on your presentation about perfectionism. Touche, Sarah. Touche. But she's right. Because what if I did mess up? And in fact, I actually did. I wonder if any of you noticed it. But we need to talk about those things. Because failure is necessary to success. It is needed. And everybody experiences failure. And we need to stop judging ourselves by outcomes created by they, whoever they are. And we need to start looking more at our content. Because our content is what is really important. Thank you.